The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the porcelain plate, but the sound was nothing compared to the silence that followed her words. A burden. That was what my son's wife had just called me. Right there in the middle of dinner, her voice sharp enough to slice through the roast beef on the table. I looked up, and every pair of eyes froze on me. My son David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My granddaughter fidgeted with her napkin, sensing the tension, though she was barely old enough to understand. And across from me, Anna, my daughter-in-law, sat stiffly, her lips pursed, as though daring me to object. I'm 80 years old. I have fought in a war, worked half a century in a steel mill, and buried the woman I loved more than life itself. I have learned to carry grief, pain, and loneliness quietly. But I never thought I would live long enough to hear myself called a burden by the family I gave everything to. And yet I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the table. Instead, I leaned back, folded my hands, and said softly, "Anna, do you know what the word burden really means?" Her face paled instantly, and the silence in the room grew heavier. When Margaret, my wife, died 3 years ago, the house grew too quiet for me. The clock ticked louder, the nights grew colder, and every meal felt like a chore. David asked me to move in with him and his family, and though pride made me hesitate, I eventually agreed. At first, it was good. My granddaughter, Lily, loved having me around. We built puzzles, went on walks, and I told her stories about how her grandmother and I met at a county fair, where I dropped a pie in her lap and spent the next 50 years making up for it. But Anna never looked at me the way Lily did. To her, I was another mouth to feed, another chair at the table, another weight on her shoulders. She never said it out loud until tonight. It happened over the roast beef dinner. A small thing, really. I had asked if she could pass me the gravy boat. She sighed a long, weary sound and muttered, "God, you're such a burden sometimes." The words were not meant to explode like dynamite, but they did. My son's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Lily's eyes grew wide. And me, I felt as though someone had taken a chisel to my chest. I asked her gently, "Anna, do you know what burden means?" She looked startled. She hadn't expected me to respond. Her lips parted, but no words came out, so I continued. "A burden," I said slowly, "is something heavy you carry on your back. Something you drag along unwillingly. Something that slows you down and makes life harder. That's what you think I am." Anna opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "Let me tell you about burden," I said. "When David was 6 years old, he got sick with pneumonia. The doctors told us to prepare for the worst. I carried him to the hospital in the middle of the night through a snowstorm, holding him close to my chest so he wouldn't feel the cold. I sat by his bed for 3 nights straight, praying he would breathe easier. Was that a burden?" David's face flushed, his eyes cast down. "When Margaret's mother broke her hip, she came to live with us. For years, I carried her up and down the stairs, bathed her, fed her, helped her in ways that stripped her of dignity. But I did it gladly because love is never a burden. Do you hear me? Never." Anna swallowed hard, her face draining of color. "And when Margaret got cancer, my voice cracked then, but I steadied it. I watched the strongest woman I knew fade away, piece by piece. Every day, I cooked for her, read to her, cleaned her, and held her hand until the very last moment. If love had weight, I carried mountains, but never once did I call it burden." The table was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway. Lily had tears in her eyes, though she didn't fully understand why. David sat rigid, shame written across his face. Finally, I said softly, "If being old and needing a little help now makes me a burden, then I pity the way you see family. Because family, Anna, is not measured by convenience. It is measured by love." Anna's fork slipped from her fingers. She looked down at her plate, her cheeks burning red. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. My words had cut deeper than any rebuke could. Dinner ended in silence. I excused myself, went to my room, and sat by the window. I didn't cry. 80 years makes tears scarce. But my chest ached with a heaviness I couldn't shake. A knock came at the door. It was David. "Dad," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her." I looked at my son, the boy I once carried through a snowstorm, and felt both pride and sadness. It's not about stopping her, son. It's about teaching her. She has to learn that one day she'll be old too. And if she sees me as a burden, she'll fear the same fate for herself." He nodded, ashamed. Later that night, when I turned off the lamp, another knock came. This time it was Anna. She stood in the doorway, pale and trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean it. I was tired, and I shouldn't have said that." I studied her for a long moment. Then I said, "Tiredness doesn't invent words, Anna. It only loosens the ones already inside you. But if you mean your apology, then prove it. Not with words, but with kindness." She nodded, tears brimming, and slipped away into the hall. The next morning, Lily ran into my room with a drawing she had made. It was of me, her, and her parents standing together. At the top, she had written in clumsy letters, "Family is love, not a burden." I chuckled softly, my old heart warming. Maybe Anna had told her. Maybe she had listened. Maybe the lesson had taken root. As I folded the drawing and placed it in my pocket, I whispered to myself, "Margaret, you'd be proud. Even in your absence, you're still teaching us all." And with that, I went down to breakfast, not as a burden, but as a grandfather, a father, and a man who had carried much but never without love.